One of the lovely factors of my ASD is I sometimes have a real difficulty in navigating or understanding sarcasm. So someone will go down a sarcastic path and I think they're being dead serious. And I'm like, oh, holy guacamole, this sounds real serious for you. Let's talk about this. They're like, no, I'm kidding. I'm not here for anyone else. 99% of the time, it's organizations that are bringing me in to work with the individual. And even in the contracting process, I'm very clear, I'm here for the individual.
Oof, preach.
Basic office design and making sure that's not neurodivergent hostile, even from like a lighting and a color perspective.
Like fluorescent blue emitting lights.
Like, I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than be in one of those offices.
Welcome to the Attention Different podcast. My name is Stephen Tonti, and I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of the company Attention Different, an adult ADHD advocacy and edutainment media company. And today, co-hosting with me is my man,
Aaron Smith, and I'm a licensed clinical therapist and ADHD coach, and co-founder, co-host of Attention Different, and a coach over at Potential Within Reach.
Heck yeah. And today we are stoked because we have a very special guest, Rita Ramakrishnan. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You nailed it.
Awesome. If you've ever described one of the following behaviors to someone, hyperfocusing for 6 hours, going blank in a brainstorm, needing to walk while you think or pace while you talk, then watched them nod politely while clearly filing it under mildly concerned, then this episode is for you. Our guest today has built her entire coaching practice around a single reframe. Those behaviors are not flaws demanding to be tolerated. They provide key insights about how your brain works best. Rita Ramakrishnan is a neurodivergent executive coach, former chief people officer, and founder of Iksana Consulting. She's been diagnosed with both ADHD and autism, and she didn't get that second diagnosis until she was 35. Today, we're getting into what it means to carry both, how that combination shapes the way ADHDers lead and work, and why the moment someone stops apologizing for how they think and starts building with it changes everything. Rita, we're so lucky to have you. Thank you for being on the Attention Different podcast. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. We are excited to have you here. And Aaron usually takes us away with a first question. You got one for us?
Yeah, so you have a unique two-part diagnosis journey here. And I want to say just right off the gate that while popular culture has deemed ADHD plus ASD or autism spectrum disorder, we've called it ADHD. That's not an official diagnostic label or category within the DSM. But I want to understand a little bit about how that journey was for you of getting diagnosed with ADHD and then later autism. And, just tell us a little bit about your backstory with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was in university, and it was one of those moments that made a lot of sense and made a lot of my childhood make sense. I think most people who are navigating a new diagnosis, an adult diagnosis, basically start with a backwards pass. What does this tell me about who I have been and why I had certain challenges and why things felt twice as hard for me than it was for everyone else? So there's this big backwards pass and sense making that your body and your mind go through. But then there's a sort of tipping point where you say, okay, now that I have this information, what's new and different for me now? What becomes possible for me now? And the time at which I was diagnosed, I think there wasn't as much research, there wasn't as much support that was out there. It was still very much treated as something to be accommodated, something that might be inconvenient for the people around me. And so I would have to fit myself in a box and have to work hard through masking, through mirroring, through other types of interventions to fit into this box that everyone else was operating within. And so that was a bit challenging. And it took me almost a decade to sort of reframe that for myself and say, actually, my brain works this way for a reason. And so let me identify some of these unique gifts and think through the scenarios in which they're truly a competitive advantage and not a cognitive disadvantage. And how do I design my life in a way in which that works? Can
I pause you there for a second? I want to, for people that aren't familiar with what that might look like masking and mirroring, can you give us some stories or some specific examples in your life at that time of how you had to do that to fit in?
Yeah. So it's observing, for example, when I was in university, observing how other people would participate in class and what seemed to be appropriate behavior in class. I tend to process auditorily. And so recognizing that there are a finite number of questions that it's appropriate to ask, or a finite number of times it's okay to respond to, taking cues from other people in social situations. One of the lovely factors of my ASD is I sometimes have a real difficulty in navigating or understanding sarcasm. So someone will go down a sarcastic path and I think they're being dead serious. And I'm like, oh, holy guacamole, this sounds real serious for you. Let's talk about this. They're like, no, I'm kidding. And so really you become a sponge and you sort of just observe the way the people around you are reacting in certain situations, and you're mirroring that behavior. You're looking around you for reference points constantly in terms of these are what the rules are in this circumstance and this situation, and therefore these are what I have to follow. And that's how my brain made sense of the world around me.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating, especially that mirroring quality.
Yeah. And it seems like, I think the difference here between people who just have ADHD, and obviously ASD and ADHD, I think are close cousins genetically, and
very close. Yeah.
And we may determine at some point we're on one broader, large spectrum.
Right. Right. Not, just might be all one happy spectrum. Yeah.
But that's not where the research is at this moment. But we know they're very closely related, and there's some genetic linkages there. But I think the main difference in sometimes the way it presents when it's pure ADHD without ASD is, I think, the amount of social difficulties. There's people with ADHD who have some social anxiety and maybe some awkwardness. Maybe they overshare or interrupt or talk in a tangential manner. But I think one of the factors I think we know around ASD is that it's, like you said, this exorbitant amount of energy that goes into trying to understand the social nuances and the unscripted nature of the way conversations happen. What are the social expectations, and constantly having to be hyper vigilant in your mind of monitoring and self-monitoring. How am I doing? What are their expressions? So it drains, and it kind of takes a lot of energy. Would you agree with that kind of characterization? Or is there anything I'm like leaving out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's burning your brain calories, right? Your body's actually burning more during periods of time where you're masking and mirroring. I think the latest statistic I saw in research was around 30% more, up to 30% more. And so it's a real energy suck. But I will say it also shows up in different ways in terms of suppressing your gifts. And so, for example, quick information processing and pattern recognitions are features that come with my ADHD, and they're features that I love about my brain. And so being able to look at disparate data sets and say, actually, these are what the patterns are. I was a former management consultant. And in management consulting, that's actually a very valuable skill set, but you don't necessarily want to overshadow the more senior folks on your engagement. And you're saying, well, if nobody else has noticed this, then it's probably not a good thing for me to say. When I have all these experienced people around me, I need to fit into this box. I need to operate in these ways. My job is just to do the numbers crunching as an analyst and sort of operate in a specific way. And so there's this constant sense of suppression. So my brain is making connections that nobody else is making, and therefore it must be wrong.
Oh my God, I've lost track of the number of times I've heard this, for the record. And forgive me for interjecting, but I have an executive assistant nowadays. Aaron knows this. I'm very happy. And this is a person my age who's also ADHD and has brought this up explicitly, that there have been run-ins with past employers where she has seen the forest for the trees, if you will. She's seen a bigger picture that other people are missing. And when bringing it up, even in a polite way, it can often come off as confrontational, right? Or a sort of a blight on their ego, right?
Yeah, very much so. And so you're constantly... There's an element which is constantly having to decode what's explicitly said and what's the implicit rules of engagement in whatever scenarios that you're in, and trying to fit within that matrix is deeply exhausting. And again, you're suppressing gifts that could be competitive advantages for you, that you could be using to make the world a better place, to make your life easier, to make your work easier, to enhance relationships and the way in which you engage with people.
Sounds complicated and stressful.
And to make the company better overall too. I think sometimes we have like the company culture is a culture of like, don't stir up problems, don't call out the issues. But I think folks who are on the autism spectrum oftentimes will be very honest and direct, and maybe something that's an issue needs to be brought up because they're actually calling attention to something that's very critical and important, regardless of how it affects the ego in the moment of those company executives. I think we are great, especially ADHDers and folks on the spectrum, I think are great at pattern recognition and honing in on where we're doing things wrong and where we could optimize and do things better to make, one, I think our lives easier, right? We've had to go through our own working world and life navigation journeys where we've had to figure out all these ways for us to fit in and find tools and find novel ways to do things. So I think when we're placed inside of a company culture and a structure like that, where we see processes and stuff that's inefficient or could be done differently, or especially if it's done in a way that is ethically dubious or wrong, we start to say, wait, that's not in alignment with the mission. That needs to be called out. But that also draws a lot of heat onto us, right?
Yeah, and that ethically dubious point is such an important part of this as well, right? ADHDers, neurodivergent folks in general, but particularly ADHDers, are justice warriors. We have that high degree of justice sensitivity that comes with a neurodivergence. And so there is this element of, you see something that's unfair, it may not impact you in your day, but you see something that's inequitable or unfair or clearly a violation of rules. And there's this energy around suppression, right? So in an environment which you have to mask, it's really hard to do, but sometimes you have to keep your mouth shut in order to fit in with the status quo. But it's almost impossible to do that. You have to say something, you have to do something. Otherwise, you're not going to sleep at night. And so it makes it challenging to exist within environments and to operate within super traditional environments that aren't wise to or aware of cognitive differentiation. And how how to support that, how to nurture it, and how to leverage it.
Hey, Stephen here. Sorry to interrupt. We just wanted to take a brief moment to tell you about this week's sponsor. At Attention Different, our mission is simple. Offer ADHD adults proven practical strategies for living a more balanced, fulfilled ADHD life. And that is why we are thrilled to offer our latest course, Thriving with Adult ADHD. While other courses might focus on the pain and struggle of being an adult with ADHD, and we do not want to minimize that, this course is designed around accessible, relevant, and applicable techniques that address the most common challenges facing ADHD adults. Inside Thriving with Adult ADHD, you will learn how to get organized by building routines and habits to bring structure to your days. Regulate your emotions by developing strategies to manage your emotional ups and downs. Learn to manage your energy for productivity without burnout. Thriving with Adult ADHD features 2 hours of on-demand video, 10 downloadable resources, lifetime access to the material, and a satisfaction guarantee. Go to attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. That's attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. Hey, thanks for the quick break. Now back to the interview.
If we can for a second, let's game this out. Say that you have a client who's in the situation you just described, which is a situation it sounds like you intimately understand from your past experience. How do you advise that they carefront? I'm taking the Brene Brown word here, but how do you advise they carefront this situation rather than confront, but deal with the situation, navigate it, etc.?
Yeah. So the most important thing for me when I'm engaging with a coaching client is that self-reflexive angle. So I want you to understand what you're going through in this moment so you have greater choices. And ultimately, this has to be your choice with what you want to do with it. But let's actually explore not just a situation, but let's explore what's happening in your body and in your mind. When you think about the scenario, what are the aspects of it that really irk you? What rules do you think this is are violating? Are those personal rules or are those stated rules? Is this something, this is part of your code or your value system? Let's understand that value system. Is it fair to ascribe it to others? Let's explore the concept of fairness and really digging deeper into sort of the total situation and this person's relationship to the situation. And then they've actually been able to explore it in such a way that they can make good decisions for themselves. Ultimately, that's the goal with most coaching in this space. When I'm coaching a leader or an executive, it's let me hold up that mirror for you. Let me expand your aperture. So you're seeing yourself relative to all of these different positions. It's like doing, it's like a dance floor, right? You're dancing on the dance floor and then moving up to the balcony and watching yourself and making different choices based on the way people are dancing around you and the total picture that you see now. And then giving them the agency. I think folks who have ADHD or ASD oftentimes feel like decisions are made for them and they have a lack of agency or control over their body, their mind, and the world around them. So for me, it's really about let's evoke some greater awareness and give you opportunities to identify choices in front of you and make the choices that feel right.
Is that an intrinsic, is that, I like that perspective taking kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that a intrinsic battle sometimes between emotional flooding, emotional dysregulation, and like the timing and how you say things? Because I think like on Stephen's framing of it being this carefronting instead of a direct conflict, there's a nuanced way to approach it and to thread that needle and kind of still get the results that you want. Can you kind of like talk us through like a little bit of what you think is a way to do that in professional context and also feel authentically true to ourselves?
That's a really great question. And I'm trying to think of a book. Books are my love language, so it's somewhere on these shelves. But there's a book called Your Body is Your Brain. And it really talks a great deal about somatic awareness. And so step one with someone who's navigating a crisis like this is like, let's pause. Let's pause and acknowledge what's happening. You are feeling what? What is showing up in your body? Let's talk about dysregulation. Let's talk about, how to regulate yourself, what topples you, what discombobulates you and puts you in a state of dysregulation. Let's just explore this, acknowledge it, and hold space for it. And then we can tease it out and say, anytime something like this happens, it's data. Your body is a sensory organ and it is giving you data. So let's explore this from a different angle. Like let's zoom out a little bit and pretend you're not you and just look at the patterns that exist within this context and what the data is telling you. And so what you're doing there as well is you're giving them the opportunity to use their gifts in evaluating the situation from different angles and identifying patterns. And being able to identify why their body is reacting in certain ways, come to terms with it, and then make choices about it.
While simultaneously, I've thought about this often. There's a bit of a magic, like a beautiful magic that we as coaches, therapists, thought leaders, consultants, as ADHDers and ADHDers perform for our clients and for our folks following us. And it's the simultaneous aesthetic distancing, making the subjective more objective, but then like very quickly, sometimes like immediately at the same time, a hypersubjective take on their own, as you said, their own skills, their body, like the process of insisting, let's step outside of the overwhelming, emotionally fraught space where we feel shame or guilt or embarrassment, etc. Let's step outside of that. And let's objectively look at this situation and treat it like a problem set that's not related to your ego. But then simultaneously reminding the person in that process that these are you. These are your skills. This is actually part of what you do really well. It to me is a profound magic that you perform.
Very much so. And there's something to be said. I just wrote a piece on containment theory. Side note, I'm finishing up my master's right now. I'm about to start my doctorate. So I go into theory.
Congratulations. Please. I mean, we're both, I think Aaron and I are comfortable with a little bit of theory.
We love nerds. It's one of those things where Bion, I think was a French philosopher, but he was sort of talking about being a container. So facilitators and coaches, oftentimes when we think about a role, we're the container. We hold the space for the individual to come to us and say what they need to say and explore their things in a safe way. But part of being a container isn't just holding the space, it's metabolizing what they're giving you and being able to present it back to them in a way. So we're thinking about psychodynamics, things that dysregulate, things that might be little t trauma or big T trauma or whatever that looks like. And so the individual is unable to process that and make sense of it on their own. And so they're coming to you as a coach or facilitator, as a container to say, I'm throwing this at you, and half of our role isn't just to absorb it, it's to metabolize it and structure it back for them in a way that it's usable and navigable and sort of tolerable for the state, the mental and physical state that they're in, so that they can do something with it that they couldn't have done alone. Yeah.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. I like that distinction. Yeah. I think it's too simplistic the way that we're told just to hold space, because it can become an echo chamber, especially if it's like, you think about, there's a dynamic there of someone is paying you to listen to their problems, right? But you're not there to just make them feel good or to simply like pair it back to them. Like that's what friends do. Friends will pair it back to you and be like, oh, everything will be fine. Or they'll say things that are trying to support you, but they're not getting you to critically examine and to think about, maybe some of our friends, right? Some of our good friends do this, but I'd say like in general, people aren't trained in how to do this well. So they'll just come back with these knee-jerk responses that are like, oh, it'll be fine. You'll get over it. Or it's, they'll just tell you were right? Like you were totally justified in feeling that way or doing that thing, because how else could you have responded? Like, I would have done the same thing. But that's not helpful. I think with coaching, therapy, these other types of relationships, we actually want to provide a different type of environment to explore that and take different sides. The perspective taking, like, okay, from this vantage point, how does it look? Or if we step over here, could we see it from over here and look at it this way? And, or what's going on inside of you when that happened outside of you? Like, let's look in. So it's turning the lens back in and around and on top of the situation.
It sounds like we stumbled into the permission exhale. Do you mind expanding on what you mean by the permission exhale and this moment that a client has when, I think, as we've just all beautifully described, when that connection happens, when a proper container has been built and processing has happened outside of themselves and then been kind of re-gifted back to them in a more digestible way?
So the permission exhales is something I like to say happens with clients when there's this moment when someone walks in the room or onto my Zoom screen, such as it is, and they're usually quite tight. You're taking a look at their body, they're quite tight. They're holding a lot of pressure inside of them. And it's that masking, it's that mirroring energy. It's the million thoughts that are going through their head. It's trying to fit into a world that wasn't necessarily designed for them. All of these pressures to operate in a specific way. And then there's this moment during a coaching journey where the person just takes a deep breath and they melt, like their shoulders are melting, their body, the body visibly relaxes because they've realized what they have is safety. And that safety to be their whole selves, to bring their whole selves, wild thoughts, diagonal thought processes, things that don't seem to make sense for anyone else, but they have the spaciousness in this relationship to be able to relay that and know that their coach is with them to support them through that thought process, through that journey, and metabolize and hold it back and give it back to them in a way that is usable for them. It's permission to be yourself. It's permission to let go of all of the controls that you have inside your body that are constantly burning your energy. And so that's a really big part of the permission exhale. It's just like permission to be, permission to exist.
Man, do I know the permission exhale intimately. And I think the older I get, the more sensitive I am to it. Even in spaces amongst friends, even in spaces on vacation. I mean, in a world, particularly the United States, particularly in the West, where the sort of capitalist drive is all around us and constant. And I think that most people listening, even with or without ADHD, autism, et cetera, can relate to some form of masking or overwhelm or tightness or carrying the stress of performance, right, in their life. And I really cherish this permission exhale concept. Like, I think it's something that you can quite easily point out in a person. You can see in your friends and your family when they melt into vacation mode, right? Or when they melt into weekend mode. And I certainly feel it myself after just running and gunning from Monday through Friday and sitting with my friends, and it takes 45 minutes or an hour or 5 hours or a day before okay, I don't have to do anything. Like, I can actually just be here. So I appreciate it being highlighted in the coaching and therapy practice, right? That moment in which a client releases. We could segue into our radical acceptance sort of discourse, if that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it does dovetail onto that. It's like creating the environment to feel safe, to be yourself, fully yourself, and the acceptance that's there. I think you have to have radical acceptance, right? As both the coach, and then we're relaying that back to the client in a way of, I accept you, and I am giving you signals to show that, hey, I appreciate you being you and dropping the mask, and I'm going to work to follow where your brain goes and to be there for you on this journey in the way that you speak, the way you communicate, if you don't want to hold eye contact, that's okay, right? Or how do I help support you to feel the best in this situation? And so I think radical acceptance does come in here. How would you say that shows up in this context of the exhale?
Yeah, or how do you display it? How do you how do you indicate?
Something that I like to say to my clients is, your brain is a wild and beautiful thing. It is a wild and beautiful thing, and it was designed that way for a reason. Whatever you believe in terms of how we ended up on this planet, there are plenty of theories around why neurodivergence exists, like why evolution created it, because we needed explorers, we needed creatives, we needed people to innovate, we needed people to be able to hyper-focus and go deeper into issues and navigate things. And so part of it is sort of reinforcing that you are a remarkable human just as you are. You are remarkably beautiful. Your brain is remarkably beautiful as it is. Our job isn't to change it, it's to understand it. And I'm here, and I want extraordinary things for you. My only wish is for this to be an extraordinarily fruitful relationship for you in your journey to understand yourself and grow and operate in the ways that you believe are most conducive to your success. And so I think that expression of that intention, that expression of that belief structure is one of those things that helps, again, melt the tension in the room. I'm not here for anyone else. Even if it's 99% of the time, it's organizations that are bringing me in to work with the individual. And even in the contracting process, I'm very clear, I'm here for the individual.
Oof, preach.
And so knowing that of all the people in their lives, certainly they've got spouses and family and close friends, or whatever, the support structure that's there for them. But this is also one more person in your corner who just wants extraordinary things for you and is there to support you. And in framing the relationship in that light, all coaches work on a spectrum of challenge to support, and we have to do both of those things. But I'm very upfront with my clients that my style is very challenging. I'm here to challenge you. I'm here to push you, but it's all to support you and the extraordinary things that we want for you. And so that creates that sense of psychological safety. That creates an environment in which the client is getting curious about themselves without judging themselves and can really lean into that exhale.
Yeah. How do you do that? How do you actually what are some types of questions or ways you go about challenging and at the same time allowing for that support to be there?
Yeah. And can we add the layer of the clientele that you primarily work with, right? Executives and founders. There's kind of a specific exhaustion that comes from being a high functioning neurodivergent, or a high capacity, I'd rather say, neurodivergent person in a leadership role, right? Who has to, I imagine that there's, to Aaron's point, some specific language or techniques or approaches that you use in this arena.
Yeah, very much so. So I work with a lot of founders, and founders are disproportionately neurodiverse. There's a lot of research that's come out about this. So it's a disproportionately neurodiverse population. And so part of the conversation that we have, if you take a look at the startup world, you've got the idea generation, then you start to get some funding for it, and then you get more funding to scale it, et cetera. And a lot of founders in that Series B, which is where you scale, you've got product market fit and you scale, that's where a lot of allostatic overload or burnout tends to happen. And they start to really struggle there. In fact, a lot of those founders end up getting replaced by career CEOs and experienced executives. And so part of the conversation with the founder is helping them understand what led them to create the business in the first place, because that is the neurodivergent perspective. And it's saying, you're really frustrated right now because you're navigating some executive function challenges and you're overwhelmed. And, you're seeing some of these traits that you have as punishing, as really punishing and impeding your ability to succeed. But this business wouldn't exist, would it? Unless you had the temerity to believe something else was possible, unless you were able to connect the patterns that let you see a need in society. And now look, like XVC is throwing hundreds of millions of dollars your way. So it's understandable that some of this feels overwhelming, but there are extraordinary gifts here, and the gifts have gotten you to this point. So let's talk about a reframe. Yes, we have challenges, but let's talk about those gifts in a light that lets you use them in a different way. And I think part of it is also navigating the conversation around exploration and experimentation. Right. Experimentation is huge. Right? A neurodivergent person with a setback, bouncing back is a really tough concept. And I don't like using that language. Super tough. Yeah. I like using the language of bouncing forward. And so we're going to run some experiments, and some of them are going to work and some of them will. And that is okay, because when they fail, that's data. And so we're going to take that data and we'll carve a new experiment, and we're going to bounce forward to that next move and to the move after that. So it's basically saying everything that we're doing is in service of design. It's designing a world, a workplace, a set of operating principles and ways of working that are going to allow you to operate with cognitive ease, so you're not perpetually exhausted, and drive extraordinary results for yourself, for your business, for your family, whatever that looks like, whatever motivates you. But it's that reframe around, let's experiment. We're going to have to try a number of things to figure out what actually works for you, because no two neurodivergent brains alike. And we're going to keep bouncing. And we're going to take that data that we're learning and we're going to file it away so that we can make better quality experiments in the future.
Sounds familiar, Aaron.
Yeah. That's actually something I do with my clients, especially who are on the spectrum, is I think the scientific approach works very well. Of like, we're running an experiment. Here's our hypothesis. Here's what we think might be going on, but let's test this out. Let's see in practice. And then we'll modify and we'll iterate based on what the results and the data that comes back. And I love your rephrasing to this bouncing forward. That
bouncing forward, springing forward, it makes a lot of sense. And I like Aaron. We both are kind of in a more affirmative category, right? I would say rhetorically, we prefer to be in the more affirmative rather than punitive or self-flagellating or et cetera. But yeah, man, boy, do we love a whiteboard. I imagine, Aaron, some of those clients are all about the whiteboard. Yeah, the scratch pad.
Yeah. So you kind of work from this framework of understanding, creating safety in that environment to hold space, create safety, and then you work towards kind of experimenting, trying things out, and exploring what's going on. And I guess I'm just wondering here, where do people tend to get hung up? Where are the spots that I think it sounds very fluid and nice, but I think when you're actually doing this, it's much harder. What are the challenges that you see and the stuck points for people?
Yeah. So people are very focused on who they are at their core. And they're like, this is me. I know myself better than anyone else. And that's true. You do know yourself better than anyone else, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about blast radius, and we're talking about that sort of implosion of how things come and impact you. That's, I guess, a funny way for me to frame this, but I'd say one of the biggest challenges is self-awareness, a lack of self-awareness, or taking things for granted and saying, but this is just how things work, or this is something that everyone deals with. And so it's just a part of life that I have to deal with this challenge. And so I would say something that's really important in my coaching practice is I do assessments. I love a good Hogan. So identifying who you are at your best, who you are when you're dysregulated, and what your motivations and values are. Anything that's psychometrically sound that works for you as a coach or a practitioner, like go with it. But holding, one of the things I like about it is it drives greater awareness of your reputation. So the way in which your behaviors are perceived by others or received by others, and what that means in terms of the impacts that you're having on the people around you. But we also have that conversation around, but what is this doing to you? When you're dysregulated and these behaviors are showing up, they're your overused strengths. So what is it that's dysregulating you? How does that feel for you in your body? What do you notice about yourself in those moments? Typically, their aperture shifts or changes. And then highlighting patterns from other clients and saying, this is actually something that's really common that other clients have had to navigate and work through. So you're not alone in this. That's a really helpful reframe for folks. These are some strategies that have worked for other people. I think group coaching as well is a really effective modality for folks who are neurodivergent, because they're co-creating answers for each other and themselves. And they realize that they're not alone in the foxhole. They've got friends with them that are navigating the same things. And so it sort of pulls the shame and the loneliness out of this whole process and gives a library of choices to start with and to experiment with and to operate from. To answer your question, biggest snag is a lack of self-awareness. The second biggest snag is assuming that this is just a normal thing that everyone has to deal with, and not necessarily having the context about what is related to their neurodivergence, and what is it doesn't always have to be this way. Accepting that things don't always have to be a certain way and you don't have to struggle through it. Like, not all life is suffering. No. And so being able to say, let's get thoughtful about some of these patterns or some of these challenges that emerge. Are those things that other people navigate? Is this a neurodivergence thing? What is working for other people, and being willing to acknowledge that they're not everything is fixed, and they have choices that they can make that can sort of alter their trajectory.
We're about to embark on
wait, can we just take a moment to say that was an awesome answer? I was just very compelled. I'm very compelled by that response, Aaron. That was really well done.
It inspired me. It inspired me to bring this up on a personal level, is that we're about to embark on a company retreat coming up in June. And we, as kind of a neurodivergent company filled with some neurodivergent folks and some neurotypical folks, I'm curious that these assessments you bring up and some of the tools for a company like ours who's about to have a retreat, because I think it would be really valuable for us to maybe employ some of these types of assessments or tools or exercises to understand ourselves better, understand our working styles better, how to relate and structure things differently to help with different neurodivergent profiles within the company. I'm wondering if there's kind of any tools or assessments that you would recommend for an organization that they can kind of...
A top 5 list?
I got you. So I would say, depending on different levels, for leadership teams, I love using the Hogan. And what I do is I administer the Hogan to all of the individuals, and they have a Hogan team report that you can use, or you can figure out the patterns yourself. But then it's putting together the team patterns. So like, this team in general has a very high skeptical score. And let's talk about what that means in terms of not necessarily like the assumptions that you make with different intentions, how you respond to specific, like when you're dysregulated, to specific situations in terms of questioning, in terms of making things harder for yourselves or harder for other people. And so we talk about those team patterns, and people will immediately say, yes, like, I am part of that majority. So, and you're right, it's not necessarily serving us. Some of these things serve us because of the environments that we're in. I do some work in the crypto space with crypto companies, and there's a lot of vigilance and a lot of moving parts and changing things. And so sometimes like being able to slow things down to go faster later, some of these patterns actually serve them. So it's understanding these patterns within the context of the organization. But to answer your specific question, I love the Hogan for senior leaders and leadership teams. More broadly across the organization, if you wanted to do something for an entire company, irrespective of level function, I highly recommend Clifton Strengths, formerly known as StrengthsFinder. I think taking a strengths-based
yes.
It's always start with a strengths-based approach. And I've actually known companies, worked with companies where we'll do the StrengthsFinder, we'll do the debriefs, a little bit on individuals, but like we'll come together and we'll go through a series of exercises to understand ourselves. And that becomes the taxonomy. Our top 5 becomes the taxonomy for how we work together the rest of the year, or until the sort of next thing. And we'll start to say like, hey, this is like, you're a strong arranger. That's not my sweet spot. I would really love if I could pick your brain on this thing. Or if there's someone that's challenging to work with, you're starting, instead of blaming it on the individual, you're starting to look at patterns across the organization. And you're saying systemically, we're having to operate in different ways. So what are the clashes between multiple patterns that are driving strife right now? And how do we make better choices around it? So love the use of those. Another really great one is the leadership circle profile. So that's my top 3 list is LCP, StrengthsFinder. Oh, and actually I'll give you DISC. DISC is not a psychometric assessment. It just assesses communication preferences and communication styles, but there's a real richness of dialogue that you can do in a DISC debrief within the context of an offsite with the broader team. And it just drives towards much higher quality collaboration moving forward.
That's excellent.
Wonderful.
I love that list. Yeah. We're gonna definitely.
Yeah, I remember the character strengths. The StrengthsFinder came about when doing my own coaching training at ADCA, and one of the more profound discoveries that my trio made. We were all broken up into trios, right? Baby coaches on their way to becoming certified and licensed. One of the profound things we found out of the 27 strengths that were listed as, sort of in a ranked order for how often you lean on them.
You're probably talking about the VIA, the VIA.
Correct. The VIA StrengthsFinder. Yeah. Okay. VIA. And it gives you 27 strength categories, right? Or strength qualities, personalities rather. Yeah. That the top 7 of which are behavioral or personality-based strengths that you lean on every day, right? So these are like these kind of create your character profile. What we found through working together over the course of that semester, if you will, was that for each of us, to a person, when we were in a moment of crisis, whether it be small C crisis or big C crisis, a DEFCON 1 or 2 situation, our bottom 7 strengths suddenly became our top. And this was a paramount discovery amongst us of like, oh, these things that we fundamentally don't lean on very often, suddenly in these specific circumstances become our top 5 or top 7 go-to strengths. And it illuminated for us as future coaches, right? Oh, there's not just this forever fixed 27 personality traits that we only, that we sort of lean on in a ranked order from 1 through 10 and then 10 through 20 and 20 through whatever. Actually, they ebb and flow, and there's fluidity depending on the context, right? So these are context dependent strengths. And that was personally a profound discovery a decade ago. I'm assuming that you've had similar experiences when working with these founders and executives in their character profiles.
Very much so. And I'll add VIA to my list as well. So there's the Clifton StrengthsFinder, and then VIA does a really good job around strengths and values and like sort of understanding.
Yeah, values. Yes.
The values. So your core operating system and what that's based on. It's a phenomenal tool. But yeah, we sort of have these founders, and I think it gives you language to describe it and to work with it and to sort of leverage that as you're continuing to engage in thoughtful debate and thoughtful conversation around how to drive a mission forward, how to achieve target objectives, all of that stuff. But it also gives you a taxonomy to understand yourself.
Yeah, your self lexicon. I like that taxonomy to understand yourself. But it does. It's like creating, even though we all share the same words in the English language in this instance, it does provide for you the gift you receive is your own lexicon based on circumstance, based on scenario.
Well, moving from the individual to the company and the structure, because the individual understanding themselves and trying out these different tools on the individual level, right? I'll run these little experiments in my communication, my behavior, my own working preferences, things that they can change themselves. there seems like there's also structural things, right? As a company, how can companies better structure the way they do things to support neurodivergent profiles and people within those companies from the leadership on down? What are some very specific ways that companies can do that, change those structures?
Yeah. So I don't want to get into a huge debate on return to office, but like, listen, I have clients that are 5 days a week in the office and they work phenomenally well together and it's a really positive culture. And I have clients that are 100% remote. I think you can have a positive company culture either way, but I would say there should be some flexibility that's offered. There should being able to engage in high quality discussion around how do you do your best work and where is that? We might have business reasons to keep you in the office, but what conditions can we create within that context to make sure that you have what you need? So that might be, I used to work at Square and they had this beautiful office where they had a library that was completely silent. So if you needed a silent place to work, you could do that. They had multiple coffee shops inside the office, so you could sort of go and body double and co-work with others, spaces for club, etc. So basic office design and making sure that's not neurodivergent hostile, even from a lighting and a color perspective. That's a really smart way to think about it, particularly if you're in office. And if
fluorescent blue emitting lights.
I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than be in one of those offices. Can't do it.
Open workspace environments.
Yeah.
I have hilarious stories from friends whose companies transitioned to an open workspace environment and no options for privacy or for quiet, and just truly the insanity of that decision on a company scale. Yeah.
And these are not changes that are just specific to neurodivergent employees. Everyone is operating on various spectrums, and having diversity within your office space, if you're mandating return to office for different styles of people to be able to work in the ways that are most conducive to their needs, beautiful. It's a little bit of an investment, but if you want us there, put that work in. So that's one thing. That's one structural change. And or offering, if you're not wedded to a return to office, being flexible with how much time people spend in the office and giving them the ability to work where they need to get their work done. Great. It's a great way to be accommodating. Thinking about things like meeting structures, right? We take for granted when we join a meeting or when we go to an organization that the meeting is going to always operate in a similar type of way. But getting curious about how people are receiving those meetings, or if they're what is the purpose of the meeting, for example, and do we outline that purpose? Would outlining it be more conducive? Yes. If this is a decision-making meeting, maybe we give out the pre-read so people have time to digest it.
Explicitly saying, this is the purpose, here's what we're doing, so that people don't have to read between the lines and it's just some title of the meeting and they're assuming, well, everyone knows what we do in these type of meetings.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, this is a design session. So this is what you can expect in a design session or a brainstorm. This is our expectation. If you need to do some pre-work, if you need to prepare in advance, here are some reading materials that you can do. Note that we'll also provide 10 minutes at the top of the meeting for us to review things if you process things quickly. So you can use the first 10 minutes of the meeting, but here are the readings as well. If you want to do it in advance and digest it. Those are certain options. Some people don't like to make decisions within the meeting itself. And they might say, hey, can you give us a day to process? And then can we come back and make the final decision? So again, identifying cognitive preferences, information processing speeds. Some people are really fast, some people are not so fast, and they are more thorough. And just being fluid or being willing to sort of clear the board on all the assumptions you make about how meetings ought to happen and how people ought to work together. And then starting from scratch and saying, what would be most helpful to get the best outcomes out of this meeting? What does each person need to be successful, and how do we put that in our design? And there's lots of literature out there. Amazon, I think, has a bunch of things that they do, and they publish it pretty widely, so other companies can emulate it if they want. Square does the same thing, or Block, I should say, does the same thing about how they do work async and synchronously. There are a lot of organizations that sort of outline their processes and make it a little bit easier to function within them. You're not guessing at the rules.
What are some of those things that those companies are doing?
Amazon gives you 10 minutes. So all meetings have a memo, and Amazon gives 10 to 15 minutes at the top of the meeting for people to actually read those memos, because everyone's busy. They're jumping between meetings and maybe they don't want to spend their evenings.
Totally.
It's kind of wild. kind of wild. But that's something that they do. We went through a process for one of my clients, which was Payoneer, around evaluating what made effective meetings, and meeting timings made sense, and the number of people that can be in a meeting. So Amazon calls this the 2 pizza rule. Never have more people in a room than 2 pizzas can adequately feed.
Love that framing. I'm not necessarily endorsing all of Amazon's business practices, but that's a very cute thing to say. That's a very cute framing.
So that's like the number of people that are allowed to be in a meeting, and then outlining people's roles. Like, you are part of the decision. Right. You're a consultant here. We're here for your opinion, and just being clear around expectations. That's something that we started doing at Payo. So those are some small examples. I would say, what else am I thinking about? Being mindful of the length of a meeting. People have, and like how you're structuring the meeting itself for involvement. If someone's up there presenting for 30 minutes, the information is going to be like Swiss cheese. You'll get some of it, you'll lose some of it. Totally. Because people typically need to process every 20 minutes and reorient the content and file it away in their schema. So making sure that you're if it's a longer meeting, how to structure it the right way, how to invite participation. How do you think about folks who are on call on Zoom versus folks who are live in person? How do you create an equitable experience so everyone's voice is heard, and everyone has a voice to be heard? Even things like, as a facilitator, if I'm running a session that's a hybrid between people in the room and people outside of the room, using chat boxes, having everyone log in and use chat boxes to answer some of the questions. So small, tiny considerations, small things that you can do to create a better meeting experience for everyone, and make sure that things in the organization are running more smoothly for all folks, regardless of cognitive.
Yeah, the more that I have these conversations like the one with you today, the more that I feel like we are still inhabiting the neurodivergence, being the explorers and adventurers of our species. It's just within this modern tech-heavy office world that we've created together. What you're describing, it seems compassionate and considerate of all brain types, of all neurotypes, rather than just the neurodivergent. I find it not ironic, but perfect, wonderful, beautiful that it is the neurodivergent entrepreneur and leadership class that's rolling these out, right? That has been like, hey, I don't like this sort of cookie cutter. You refer to spiky cognitive profiles, right? Which I really like, and the idea of curves versus flattening curves. And there was such a sort of militaristic assembly line approach to industry in general for many, 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 many years, where the idea was to get identical kind of processes, and that's what efficiency meant, right? Efficiency meant how similar can you get these processes across an industrial
people become
scale
cogs in the machine.
Yes, and that equaled efficiency. And we are entering, I do feel the sensation of entering the dawn of a new era, a new type of working model where actually efficiency means catering to specificity, specific catering to specific personality and brain types, right? And I'm glad to hear it, because it's as you said, little tweaks, little changes give everybody the aha moment, the moment to breathe, the moment to transition from what they were just doing into what they're now about to do, and relinquishing total responsibility that we sometimes feel we have over every meeting or every interaction or everything, right?
Yeah, another great book is the Canary Code, Dr. Ludmila Preslova, where she talks about this phenomenon, right? Neurodivergent folks are the canaries in the coal mine. We're the first person to notice things that are discombobulating, but they impact everyone. They just might not impact them as overtly, or it might be a delayed impact. But by being the canaries, we can sort of be your early warning system, so you can start thinking about these things early and supporting your employees.
What a wonderful nod for self-advocacy, right, Aaron? That's a great, what a great pitch for self-advocacy. You may think in the moment you're advocating for the self, but not realize that on a scale of 100 years, you're advocating for your species.
Yeah, and I think that I would even venture to take it even further, that we're not just the early warning system. We are actually the innovators and the avant-garde, the ones that are the disruptors, the ones that are actually pushing society and innovations to the forefront. And I think I don't know, I struggle to really actually go back and say, what are any technologies in the last, really since the dawn of time, honestly, like that you can point to any major innovations? Can you point to ones that where you say, yeah, this was a neurotypical person who actually did this thing, right? From the inventions
Kind of hard to do.
Of the internet to the inventions of electricity.
Einstein, Marie Curie. I mean, like people who were fundamentally 15 degrees off cool, right, as like some comedians would say.
Every innovative technology that moved the needle forward and people that were ahead of their times, I would say are arguably neurodivergent. Maybe they weren't labeled as such or seen as such, but you look back and you're like, Isaac Newton, like these people, like they had very particular profiles that you could look back and say they were neurodivergent. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to actually find, it's Noam Wasserman's research. But there is actually a statistic around the number or percentage of founders that are being identified as neurodivergent. And I think it's certainly above 30%. It's somewhere between 30 to 50%. So it's a very large percentage of the population of folks that are driving the greatest innovations that are changing our lives, that are reshaping the way in which we engage with each other and serve our communities, are driven by neurodivergent minds. And so there's like, whether you believe in divine intervention, and that's how we ended on the planet, or evolution, there's something to say that there was a need for us as a species to continue to evolve and build and change. And that's where we were created. We're part of the evolution cycle. We're part of the cycle of human beings continuing to evolve in ways that allow our species to continue forward.
Yeah, it's like we're saying, honestly, if I can paint this in a different light, just briefly, like a single sentence, different light, it's like we're saying in the neurotypical category, there still exists a need for improvement. But then within the neurodivergent category, it's kind of like a 4x, 8x, 10x. There's like a force multiplier effect. We are more bored, more dissatisfied. We have a higher sensitivity to injustice, right? We have that rejection sensitivity, right? We have this heightened sense of empathy, this heightened sense of, which I'm like, I appreciate this framing because it means that there are humans amongst us who don't have the 10x drives that we do and still demand change, right? Still demand improvement.
And I want to be careful here too, just to not overgeneralize, but because I do think that's what I was trying to do as well. Yeah. There are neurodivergent folks and profiles who are not out there changing the world or the status quo. And actually they might be very happy plugging in to a certain already a very clear structure of society, a very clear career, and just doing that day in and day out. And they might enjoy that and get satisfaction from that. So not everybody, is who is neurodivergent is on the precipice of doing this. I want to be clear that it's not everybody has that, but I also think it's a factor. I would venture to say it's a factor of how we nourish and cultivate those unique potentials and those minds. Because what we do oftentimes is we hold people back by fitting them this square peg into a round hole, fitting them into a certain box, and not actually like figuring out early enough where are their strengths, where are their interests, where do those things align, and how can we best support that individual to have the biggest impact on society overall. And so we're actually losing, I think people are falling through the cracks. And I wonder how many genius level and innovative folks are out there that have not been given opportunities because they're just falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I think it's a really significant population. And I think you raise a issue as well. Like, I have my bias and my lens is largely focused on these folks who are innovating, who are in these spaces, because that's my client base. But there are folks who are falling through the cracks because they're geniuses and they just don't have the support structures around them to elevate and to get into these ways of working and into these circles. There's also a whole other population that's neurodivergent, but have very high support needs. And I want to recognize that sometimes the way we frame neurodivergence can sometimes feel like marginalization for those folks. Or like we're framing it in a way that's deeply inconsistent with their experience. So like, we're not a monolith as a community. And I really appreciate the attention that you called to this, because I do think we have to account for and acknowledge this area.
Yeah, Aaron and I are through Attention Different. We are a radical acceptance based company, the Buddhist principles, but also adopted by folks like Dr. Marsha Linehan and her development of DBT. But we, like, in the same category, we both kind of shrink away from and get the heebie-jeebies when people say my ADHD is a superpower, right? Or I am a superhuman because of this neurodivergent quality. We have, quite simply put, way too much data and unique lived-in experience with people who fundamentally don't feel that way, right? Who have whatever high support needs they may have, and actually are offended, insulted, hurt by the idea that, like, the thing that has caused them an immeasurable amount of strife and struggle might be considered writ large as a superpower. And I particularly actually have my own social justice warrior in terms of holding space and keeping room for those folks. And I take it upon myself in the world when someone says, well, ADHD is my superpower. I go, I don't know if I agree with that. I want to hear more about why you use that term and where that comes from and what's important to you about claiming it in such a way. And I wonder if you've taken a moment to think about others who don't feel that way and how that makes you feel. So I agree.
Yeah.
It's
what would you say? What would you say on
definition.
that point of the superpower idea? Have you heard
What
that?
would I say?
Yeah.
Listen, I hear it all the time from different folks. What I'll say is this: if you have gotten to using that language because you've gotten to a place of radical acceptance and celebration of your strengths, then that's fine. Like, if that is the word that allows you to engage with your diagnosis in this beautiful, productive way of possibility, then it doesn't bother me. Now, it's something that I would raise awareness, depending on my relationship with the individual. I might raise awareness around that and get a little curious, similar to the approach you took. Just like, I love that you're seeing this. I really love that you're seeing this as a gift. I'm not sure if you're aware, though, there are folks within our community that have really high support needs, and that's a very activating term for them. So I just wanted to, with no judgment, whatever, I really love this for you, but with no judgment, I want to raise some awareness around this in case you didn't already know, and you end up saying this to someone else who falls within that category. Just wanted to leave that for you. No attachment to the principle, nothing. Here you go, take it or leave it. But by the way, I'm super happy for you, and I love this thing for you.
Yeah. So it's really, we get into trouble when we generalize our own experience and make it the thing that other people must have also experienced. Like, because I have this condition or diagnosis or certain strengths or traits about me and my brain, that's the way other people are. And I think we've got into this murky realm with this, especially on social media, influencers, people talking about this, where they're like, either I can do these things or I can't do these things. And we generalize it across the board. Like, well, everybody who has ADHD or everyone who has ASD, everyone who's autistic is like this, or everyone has this problem with this. And that's where we need to be very careful to tread lightly, to not insert our own experience and say it's a general experience across the board. Because what we're actually doing is we're minimizing the experience of people who differ from that categorization and who actually sometimes are very much on a different level of struggle. I think as Attention Different, we want to reframe and reposition the narrative in a way that supports people to move through that self-development pyramid to more of this self-actualized space, as like Maslow talks about in the hierarchy of needs. But we have to get through some of these other more basic fundamental things before we can ever reach self-actualization. And I think it's up to all of us to understand people are at different levels with different needs. And we need to be sensitive of that.
Very much so. And again, it's operating from a place of curiosity, which drives to expansion, versus operating from a place of assumption, which drives to reduction. We don't want to be reductive about this, but I think there are some really great questions if you want to operate from a place of curiosity, like, hey, what has become possible for you now that you know about this? What do you know about yourself now that you didn't know before? When you think about a future, an ideal future, what does that look like for you? I'm curious. And what support do you think you might need in order to get that future? Regardless of the support needs, anyone can, you're going to get a different answer from anyone across all of those questions. But it's one of those things that's going to broaden your perspective. And I think organizations need to start asking these questions more. I think we need to start asking these questions more of each other, and the organizations need to ask this of their people, because we're in an era where we have the opportunity to drive greater awareness and understanding. Awareness and understanding lead to design, and so there's a cart before the horse thing that's happening.
I think that's it, right?
I think that's a good place to just have a mic drop moment right there.
Yes, that was our mic drop. You didn't see it? I tried to, boom. Okay, excellent. Well, okay, so this is the portion of our show where we ask Rita for her pluggables. Let us know and let the listeners know where they can find more of your material, anything that you would like to leave them with as we exit gracefully this episode of the Attention Different podcast. Plug your pluggables.
So my pluggables are this. My website is www.iksana.com. That's IKSANA.com. To your point, Iksana refers to sight. So it's to look deeply and see, and to look after and care. It has a dual meaning. And that's sort of what that resource is meant to be. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post quite a bit on research, on experiences, lived experiences of my clients, lived experiences of myself. And so if you are exploring what your ADHD or what your autism means for you, if you're navigating an adult diagnosis, if you're looking for greater support or a coach to work with you as you navigate the next part of your career or your journey, feel free to reach out.
Amazing.
Yes, you could not be in better hands. I will say that. You will not regret this.
Yeah.
We are so honored that you came on the show and shared not only your own personal journey, and we're open about that, but also all of the insights that you've gained over the years and what you're doing with your coaching company to shift the culture that's out there, culture at large. I think it's so needed, it's so important, and you are part of this Attention Different family. So we're very honored to have had you on as a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.